There's a lot going on. I lost my dad yesterday. I shouldn't be where I'm at. Statistically, single household parents. 80% of the people in jail right now had a single mother. So we grew up in the hood. A lot of my friends in the pen.
Words are violence, and you're like, nah, you ain't saying violence, dog.
So you didn't get punched in the mouth, huh?
Pay respects to the women, because childbirth is probably the hardest thing
Dude, that's powerful.
anyone will ever go through on this planet. All right, Wolfpack, welcome back to another episode of the Adaptive Alphas podcast. We've got a special guest today. Josué is the COO of Home Sourced Inc. He is a solar and culture chief, Wim Hof instructor, and a perpetual student, and husband to a lovely wife, April.
Yeah.
Can't forget that one.
No.
That one's the most important.
Yeah, she's watching this. She'd be pissed.
Josué Valenzuela. He actually goes by Sway.
Well, see, I left the Ho in college of Josué, so I just go by Sway now. Makes it a lot easier for individuals.
How are you, man?
Great. I'm running a little late, and if we're being quite honest, there's a lot going on. Lost my dad yesterday.
Oh my gosh, that happened.
It did. Yeah.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
Oh, I really appreciate it. Taking it in stride. Seeing as the emotions come in and just, letting them either like pass, fade, or sit. And it's been really nice to reflect, have conversations. You realize what's important. Had a conversation with one of my reps. We were going to either fire her or promote her. One of the two, right? And it was a grave offense. And I just told her, I was like, hey, life's too short. She's like, well, actually, I'm going on a vacation with my father tomorrow. I was like, give him an extra hug for me. I just lost mine yesterday. And she was like, what do you mean? I was like, I'm being honest with you. Like, I wanted to fire you on this phone call. And then I was like, but it sounds like you were doing it in good nature. And it seems like you have a good heart and good intentions. And like, I don't think you should be punished for something you were trying to do with good intentions. And I was like, and life's short. What do you want to do going forward? Were you trying to make that decision for the betterment or for the sabotage of the company? And she's like, of course, for the betterment. I was doing it for my team. I was like, that's what I wanted to hear. I was like, we'll promote you then. And so it was cool to make decisions based off of like, if you're like, I think Marcus Aurelius says like, live every day as if it was like your last day, right? Something along the lines. I butchered that miserably, but having that consideration that like, I'm gonna die tomorrow. What do I want to do today? Like, what's that decision's gonna be like? And that's what I did today, because I don't, any other day I probably would have just fired her. And today I decided to take a different perspective.
This is pretty heavy, and I wanted to talk a little bit about this because we've talked a couple days ago about your father's condition. Do you have a relationship with loss?
Yeah, early on, my grandmother passed. I was 12. She was the closest adult figure, guiding figure. She kept me very spiritual, very religious. She sat us down, right from wrongs, pretty much geared our morality. From Mexico, she would come and stay with us 6 months out of the year, the max you can. And she was like our guiding light. It was my dad's mom, and I didn't really have a relationship with him, but she was the most involved figure in our lives. It was really a cool dynamic. Lost her at 12 or 13. That was weird. It just didn't understand it. Then I lost my aunt, who also would come stay with us from Mexico.
Just want to focus on the matriarch, abuelita. Right, because that's an important figure in the Latino household. As you are processing, I guess, in hindsight now, what did that experience teach you as you started developing into adulthood?
Honestly, I think it just scared the shit out of me.
Really?
Yeah. Like, I'll never forget it. The Diamondbacks won the World Series that night. They told us she was going to be fine. She was probably going to make a full recovery. Went home. Then we came back. They said that she died in the middle of the night. It's like, she was like 93, 94. So she lived a really long life. But that's when I really started contemplating life, like getting into philosophy. That's where I was going through just kind of a confusing religious upbringing. I was raised on a Jehovah's Witness Bible, but I would go to like a Catholic church. So it was really like a dynamic where I really started questioning what life is and looking into it. And then I realized that the more choices you have, the harder it is to choose. And I got really confused religiously. And so I started really looking towards like just going to every church I could at that age. My mom just let me. I had friends who were Mormon, Lutheran, Protestant, Christian, Catholic, and I just went to all the churches.
How old were you?
I was 12 when I started that journey.
And then how many churches in like what period of time?
I would say until about 18, 19, I probably went to, I didn't like join them, right? But I would go to like their mass and stuff. I'd say about like 7 different types of religions. Just curious,
Yeah.
because like I didn't know that there was a difference at the age of 12. I thought God was God and that's just what it is. And I started realizing that there was certain avenues and paths you can take on a religious practice. So then I really started looking towards them, and I mean that just opens up a rabbit hole, right?
Yeah.
I went down that path, and I ended up, we transition into like my adulthood. You go into that, graduating college. Like now you got to start a life. Now you got to be the male of a family. That's a whole nother transition, and that scared the shit out of me. And so I was like, people are telling me I should know what I want to do for the rest of my life, and I had no idea. And I ended up finding a very like comforting spirituality in Buddhism and physics. So when those two things clashed for me, I started realizing they say a lot of the same things with different terminology, and that's where I started to really hone in on who I wanted to be, and essentially it's who I am today. It's just matured from the age of 23, 24, 33 now. So about a decade long on something I feel really solidified in, and I can always turn back towards it. I'm never like lost inside of that trajectory. There's just always some form of solace I can find in some type of practice or teaching. But it was a long journey, definitely. Like going through scared shitless in religion to then realizing everyone's saying the same thing, but from an egotistic perspective, like it has to be the way I want it to sound, and then to realizing that it's okay for anybody to believe in anything. It's more or less an acceptance. And I think that's where I was like, okay, this all makes sense now. Everyone wants to know what's going to happen when you die.
Oh, life's ultimate mystery.
Everyone wants to know. And it's like, you're just scared not knowing. Okay, fine. Let's go ahead and let's talk about it. Tell me, let's go down that path, right? And so I've lost a few really close people. The hardest one for me was my aunt. I was 21 studying kinesiology, and she died of a brain tumor that was of an experimental drug that they were trying for kidney failure due to type 2 diabetes. So it was lifestyle, the Mexican diet, right? Like,
Which is the American diet.
which is the American diet. Yeah. It's very, it really broke me to know that it was preventative. Like, sincerely, that's where I really dove into like understanding life, understanding the body, the basics of nutrition. Kinesiology, I was already in it, right? This one, that's where I really started like reading my books, really getting into the biology of the things, and I mean, that's changed my life forever, man. I was terrified. I walked into a room. She was my second mother, right? Like she really was. She was one of the only like family members in our family that really looked after us like her kids. I walked into the hospital room, and I gave her a hug. She had just had a stroke. So happy to see her, and she smiled. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then she looks at my mom and she goes, "Who is he?" Bro, I broke. I literally, my life dropped in that moment. I was like, had this pit in my gut, just like, what do you mean? That's possible? And then that's where like neurology, psychology, that's where I was like forever just mesmerized. It's like, you need to take this shit serious. Because if you don't, one day it might just slap you in the face and you'll wish you had just learned the basics. And so from that point forward, I just took it real serious. Went on like a whole existential crisis on diet. It went towards like vegetarianism, veganism, really started being conscious about sustainability, which got me onto this track. I would say it was that decision right there which turned me into sustainable sway, like really wanting to do something that can last as long as I live. Diet, physicality, relationships, just acts of leisure, whatever it's going to be, right? Like it took me down a path I just wasn't ready for and grateful for now.
Yeah, man. It sounds like there's a few hard truths that you were able to uncover from your experience. First hard truth is loss happens to everybody, right? We all experience it. We don't talk about it a lot. There's not, a lot of education or coaching or anything around the subject of death. but it's so prominent, right? We literally all are not ever going to get out of this game alive. Another hard truth that you came across was a lot of the chronic diseases or long-term illnesses are caused by personal choice. And I don't know what that statistic is. There's a lot of things that we could, by changing your lifestyle, could avoid and prevent, like you said.
You should definitely find the statistic because a very high margin of it is lifestyle choices. It is the way you.
I know 88% of Americans are metabolically unfit. So that's like 9 out of 10 people. Yeah, which is
crazy.
Wild.
It's wild.
I'm asking you this because you have experienced loss with people very close to you throughout your life and at a young age. What lessons did you learn? Is there a process that you pulled from that helped with the grief cycle of losing somebody so close to you? I think about that a lot with the closest people in my family are still alive, so I don't know at this point, I don't know what I'm going to do when that happens.
You realize, I had a call with a friend yesterday. She's my best friend since we were 12, and she was checking in on me. She heard about my dad. Came up with the term, and you hear it so often. It is what it is, but really at the root of that is acceptance. You realize you are in a cycle, and the cycle is death and birth, right? And when you realize you're in that cycle, it's kind of like infinite cyclical phase of life, and you can't break it. You can't get out of it unless you die. And then when you die, that's the scary part. You don't know what happens after that. So I think the biggest thing I learned from all of that was just accepting that there are some things that I will forever not be able to understand or have a real life experience of until it happens. And that was the hardest thing for me, is to realize that you cannot control life, and that you can only do so much at certain points, and there has to be this vulnerability and acceptance to what life is, because if not, then you're going to be scared, you're going to be anxious, you're going to be stressed. And at a really young age, you realize there's just certain things you can't break out of, and life is one of them.
I'm going to live to be 2000 with the, what is it called? The microchip that Elon Musk.
Yeah, Neuralink. Yeah.
I'm just playing.
I mean, you might.
I would never want to be uploaded.
And even then, though, like that Neuralink, you could live 2,000 years, and it'll honestly maybe even be 2 days for you, because that's what perception is, right?
Right.
Perception's going to be manipulated heavy when that really comes into play. And I think for me, like, that's one of those, like, the Matrix, like, the movies, not far. Like, they're calling these things organoids, and it's using human energies for technological advancements and like powering. And it's like, oh, you mean the Matrix? Okay,
that's exactly it.
Yeah,
I think when you're saying that, what comes to mind is that the ephemeral nature of life, that shortness, the ultimate mystery, that black wall, essentially, that nobody can look over or look past. If you look at it from a perspective, it can be very scary, or it can cause a lot of fear, which I'm sure a lot of people lose sleep over it.
For sure.
But you can also look at it from a perspective of that's why life is so sweet, is because all we know is this experience. And maybe that's all we are meant to know. If we go to 10 different people from 10 different countries around the world, there's 190 something countries. Sometimes we forget, but there's a lot of culture, a lot of diversity. Ask 10 different people from 10 different countries. They'll probably tell you, 100% of the time, they'll probably tell you their perception of whether it's Allah or it's Krishna or it's Jesus, that something's going to happen after they die, and they know exactly, and that's why they pertain to that faith. What did you find as far as spirituality goes? You said you're now more into science and Buddhism.
Yeah. So going from that existential crisis, or segueing from like loss and death, or just more or less philosophy, right? Got into something that I can do day in and day out, something I can go to sleep proud about, wake up excited about, and that's sustainability, right? And when I say sustainability, I mean sustainable lifestyle. I mean it in the sense of like, if I can do it today, I can do it when I'm 88, I can do it when I'm 98, right? Something that's there's a longevity to it. There's more than just the momentary and the instant gratification that's so normal these days, right? And that's where I got into solar. Got into solar in 2012. I started installing it, fell in love. Just due diligence, right? Like, I'm young. I have nature to want to heal, to do things that are better for the world, progressive, solar. I'll go install, I'll learn. And I actually wanted to do sales, and they said you need experience, and it was bullshit. You don't need experience. They were
No,
just
that's what sales
they
is,
were
right?
just saying, they were selling me, right? Seeing if I
Yeah.
could sell them back, and I was like, cool, I'll
They
go.
needed technicians.
Yeah, I'll go sell.
Who'd you work for?
Solar City. Yeah, so Elon Musk company, actually. He started
Elon
it.
Musk.
Yeah, Elon Musk and his cousin started this franchise of a behemoth in the solar industry. Fell in love with it, got into installs, learned everything, started selling it, and it was just unheard of to have somebody from the roofs then knocking doors and selling solar. And everyone's like, I'm a hippie, bro. I had long hair, big old goatee. And everyone's like, you can't sell solar on sustainability. I was like, you can't. I can. And this is why I'm here. Watch me. Did really well in sales. I was top 3% every year that I sold it door to door. And then I got into the side of realizing that I just essentially fell into one of the largest industries in the world. I didn't know that then. But like, you look at the growth, you look at the trajectory. Solar is going to be here for the next 100 years. I'd say it's going to outlive us for sure in just its growth. And then I got into the side of realizing, okay, so solar is going to be my main play. I'm going to stay in that space. This is where I'm gonna build my more or less my professional career. Like, what am I going to add to as far as like my hobbies? Like, what do I really want to look into, and like making sure other people understand. And in solar, I got into dealing with people in HR. Like, I was like a really good recruiter. I focused all on the culture. Like, when I mean the culture, I mean quite literally the shit that grows when you drop some form of a nutrient, and then starts to proliferate in that sense. And I realized that human beings create cultures by what they say, what they do, how they interact, just motive methods. And I started really focusing on the individual. Like, if I can make you happy at home, at work, well, then those interactions are going to seep into, the customer, to your team, to our meetings. Like, I can keep it lively, keep it light, but at the same time, we just keep a drive to what the goal is, really curating the culture. I did really well. We were set to benefit at what's called the cost of turnover. If you're familiar with that term, it's just the money that it takes to replace somebody. And we reduced that by 1/5 my first year in my position. Like, we paid 1/5 of what we did the previous year. So say $500,000, we went to 100,000 in 1 year span. They're like, dude, what were you doing? It's like, I was taking care of the individual. That's it. So I got really into the side of like psychology, sociology, and realizing personal and professional, there's no difference. You're the same psyche in both settings. So let's nurture that. And so that's from solar to culture in solar.
When you're talking about the cost of turnover, last I checked, which was 2015, cost of turnover to replace an employee was 1.5 of a year's salary. Is that still the case?
Yeah. It's scary too. You don't realize what you lose when you lose a tenured employee, right? You lose a big piece, like an arm almost, and you have to regrow that arm. So a lot of people don't really understand like what it goes into all of that, but you essentially have to add in all of the manpower, from the marketing to the lead generation to the recruiting to the training to then the new, say, component or the new substance that's going to enter into this culture, and it's going to dye its color forever different. Like, nobody takes that into consideration. If you want bright blue and you just put somebody in there that's black, and you don't know they're black, right? You won't know that until...
Whoa, what do you have against black?
I love black, bro. It's my favorite color. When we're talking about colors.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah, it's interesting because I think context matters too, because when we're talking about like medium and large size companies, that science or that mathematics makes so much sense. But when you're talking about small mom and pop shops, they don't give a shit. No. Very few people are like, I have like 2 or 3 employees. I don't care. Just get me a good worker that's going to show up. That's all I care about. But when you're looking at like Solar City, or for me, when I was building a recruiting software in that 2015, 2016, I was diving into all of that
Mhm.
because I saw the processes of the average sales manager and sales rep and how we had to go take out a dozen people to lunch and schmooze them and wine and dine them and sell them on the dream of becoming whatever they wanted, coming through us. And then we'd spend all this time training them, bringing them on the door, shadowing all this for them to leave 3 weeks later after months of,
Yeah.
months of due diligence and effort. I'm like, this is not sustainable. So that recruiting company was literally for how do I find that small percentage of people who stick in door-to-door sales? How do I find them? How do I measure them down to a data point using psychometric testing? And then how do I place them with these larger organizations? We had something like $300,000 or $400,000 in pre-sales, people ready to commit to this software. And you end up going down this rabbit hole and realizing you can't actually bring anyone down to a data point. At best, it might, you might curb, I don't know, 25% attrition or whatever, but you can't, like, I was like, I'm going to dial in,
Yeah.
you can't do that to a human,
You really can't. We are impulsive creatures. We are sensitive creatures. We do things because we heard a noise. Like it's this really crazy thing that there's a study that showed that like me and you, we can barely process like let's just say it's like a 1,000th of a millisecond of a screenshot, right?
Mm-hmm.
You and I wouldn't be able to read it, but our brain would process it, and it
Mhm.
would actually affect our decision making down the way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's insane on how sensitive we are, but we're not aware of how deep those senses really go. And that's where I don't think we can really go to a data point, but you can create a culture.
Mm-hmm.
You can set expectations. You can say like you either get with it or get lost.
Mm-hmm.
Like so if you can find a group of individuals who do harbor somewhat of the same characteristics and visions that you do have, and then you build something that's actually built on equanimity. It's
Mhm.
actually built on equality. It's actually built on what you said it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Then you will start to realize trust and loyalty is really at the end of it. The best way I can say it is that you have to build a mafia. Yeah, I'm sincere when I say that too. You have to trust
Okay,
them with your life.
let's dive into that. Okay, so you have to build a mafia.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
You have to build a relationship that, and this is the way I say it to my best friends. I tell my brother, my best friends, I say, look, I'm giving you a knife to my back, and I'm not going to look at you ever. And every day that we have conversations, I tell you I love you, and I confide in you certain things. I sharpen that blade every day. And if there was a day you wanted to stab me in the back, I would ask you to kill me swiftly because you would be doing me a service. Because if you stabbed me and you didn't kill me, it'd be the worst thing in my life, and you would have the worst vengeance upon you, right? Because that's what a mafia is. Like it's built on this value basis of like you have to scratch my back, I scratch your back.
Yeah, because your life depends on it.
Exactly.
Because you have skin in the game.
Exactly. Everyone calls me crazy, and I've always said this that you can learn a lot from mafias and cartels.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, not from the sense of like what they're doing isn't at all like condoning or it's good or not at all. But when it comes to what they're dealing with, it's do or die. It's life and death. And if it's a very stoic perspective, because I started this conversation off saying like I was making decisions like it was my last day.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when you make decisions on business moves, it could be your last move
Mm-hmm.
if you're doing it with deceptive intentions. If you're doing it to stab somebody in the back,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like the ramifications of that are, oh,
Yeah.
they're endless depending on what you do and who you do it to. So, yeah, if you build a mafia with those around you, trusted friends, family, whatever it is, at the end of it, all I'm saying is that there has to be the ultimate trust in what you're doing and honesty in what you're doing. Because if not, then what's the point? Like we're just playing this game to build this stress and have to worry about what somebody's gonna do against you or if they're telling you the truth. Like there's just so many loose ends, and those loose ends, like stress is a thought. Inflammation can be caused simply by thinking negative thoughts. 100%. And there's this book called The Inflamed Mind. Changed my world.
I've never read that.
They say stress, inflammation, and depression roll in a trio, and they don't know which one's first. So stress, as in thinking stressful things, can cause you to feel depressed. Depressed can send catecholamines to the brain, depression, which makes you start to inflame the body. And then it's just this vicious cycle, and it doesn't stop. So inflammation from what we eat can cause negative thoughts, can cause depression.
Yeah.
Vicious circle. A loss in the family caused depression, negative thoughts, inflammation, negative circle. Like it terrified me on thinking negatively. Not that you can't think negative thoughts, but you can't sit on them. Right? You have to, like they say, your brain is a stream of thoughts, and just like a river, you can never hold on to that position of the stream, right? Like they say, if you step into a river today or right now, and then you get out of it, you're never going to be the same person that stepped in that same river. You're not the same nor the river, because it kept flowing. Same deal when it comes to your thought process. When you hold on to something, you're trying to hold on to a stream, and that's actually not how it works. So then you get stressed out, right? Then you start going down this path of like trying to control things you have no control over, and you have to just accept things for what they are. And that's where a lot of that comes from. Like really the basis of my life now is to help people stress less. That's where when I say culture, my culture is revolved around stress management. And I understand if you come, and from a personal life and something's going wrong in your life, I need to ask you about that. How was last month? What happened? Like what stressed you out the most? What made you the most happy? Great. Next month, let's circle back and let's just make sure that stress is alleviated somewhat. And if not, how can we help you? Right? So then I can make sure that your stress management is being a priority, so that your stress is being reduced. So then you can enter states of flow and optimism a little bit more readily and quickly. So that's really like the whole premise behind all of that. When I say culture, I mean like culturing an environment that's going to curate optimization through less negative stress, because there are good stresses: ice baths, saunas, working out, hard conversations. Like there's a use stress which builds positive effects long term. But again, it comes down to like knowledge and understanding the difference between negative and positive stress, and understanding the conversations that need to be had so that you can actually start to relinquish some of the stress. Like they say that the best way to relinquish stress is to speak to somebody that is in the same situation or has been in the same situation, because as human beings, we can energetically feel the transition or the conversation from somebody who knows what it feels like.
Oh, interesting.
I have that conversation with my wife all the time, because, she'll have her menstrual cycle coming on, and I'll be like, yo, like you sound like you need a friend. And she'll like just be talking to me, and I'm not the best person to talk to when you just want to have an echo chamber. Like if you just want to bitch to me and like, yeah, you just want to stress about things. Like I'm solution oriented.
Yeah.
I will start, but that's not what she needs. She's going to get so mad at me, and she's going to get so frustrated, and she's going to think there's a blip in our frequency. And it's just like, oh no, like my love, like I don't do well sitting in negativity. Like it causes inflammation, and I start getting depressed. Like I'm not trying to be there. So I don't, quite literally, as soon as I feel that like blip in our frequency, I just call her friend. I'm like, hey, can I pay for you guys' lunch? Like
That's a great advice. That's some great advice.
It changed our relationship. And I even tell my wife, I'm like, I think it's time I call your friend.
Yeah, because you can't be everything for all people. And so that's important for you to know masculine, where you generally, what type of container you generally hold well versus the type of container she needs to thrive in. And that's another very, I guess feminine, or another woman generally. They don't, my fiance, she's in the beauty world, and they can gossip and complain until their face is blue for hours and never feel energetically drained. But if you're just complaining at me for 5 minutes, I'm like, I'm done with this conversation. Let's talk about good things that happened today.
I'm like, bro, what is your goal?
We are alive.
Yeah, what is your goal? Yeah. Like my wife looks up all of the worst negative things in the world, and I literally, bro, I said last night we were eating dinner, and she's telling me about this miserable experience. Like this man just got ripped up by a pit bull. I mean, like disgustingly. And she's just telling me the story in like vast detail. And I'm eating my food and I realize, I'm like, you do realize one negative thought takes 5 positive thoughts or 5 to 6 positive thoughts to replace that negative thought. And I said that to myself. So I put my food down. I went and I sat on her and I grabbed her face and I told her, I'm like, I just want to let you know I love you so much, but you are bringing a lot of negativity to your psyche right now. And I know that that's going to cause domino effect of negativity down the road in other conversations. And I just want to let you know, like, do me a favor and look up what amazingly positive things have happened in the world today alongside that negative one. I just need to know that you're balancing out these banters of conversations that you're having in your head because I know what it'll do later. I just want to make sure you're taking care of yourself because I even said it to her. I was like, I don't want one thing to ever happen in my life on the stories you've told me in the last week. I pray that they never even like come into the existence of my network family or anyone I've ever encountered. I'm like, tell me something that I can hope for. Tell me something that I might want in my life because negativity is just not one of them. And it's again, it goes down to like, I don't know why a lot of women like to listen to murder podcasts. Wild. Dude, if you watch and listen, like you see who's listening to this shit.
It's predominantly women.
Predominantly.
Yeah. Weird.
Dude, my wife puts that on when she's cooking every night.
No way.
Every night.
No
dude.
way. I want the wolf pack to really extract the importance of what you said and the message of what you said, because we all know who Jim Rohn is, at least if you're in the personal self-development. And he said, you're like the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yeah.
Whether he said that in the 1970s or 1990s, I think it was first published in the early 2000s, that has impacted and made a ripple effect through the self-improvement and self-help world. But even that is antiquated. Now that in 2023, you're not like the 5 people you spend time with. You're now like the 5 people you spend time with. You're like the 5 books you spend the most time with. You're like the 5 podcasts you spend the most time with. You're like the 5 TV shows you spend the most time with. You're like the 5 social media posts that you spend the most time with. And now with all this varied, like, social media content, you are just the algorithm is just reserving you over and over and over in doses of 15 to 60 seconds, whatever message and whatever you're resonating with the most. And most of our minds and psyches, due to, evolution or how God intended, they skew negative for survival, to ensure the survival of our lives. So after a certain period of time, you'll see most of that content skews negative. So that's like the newer version of what you're saying, which is so important, so profound.
It really is. Like, I've done it. Like, I've every time I say something negative, I have this routine now with my wife. We've been doing it since we started dating 3.5 years ago. We say 3 words of gratitude before you eat anything. That's it. When it could be like the sun, this podcast, and your daughter. Because those are the first 3 things I thought of. Like, I am grateful for them because they're in my stream of psyche. Like, those are just things that, and we've done it every meal, focusing on positive things, right? And so it's a way to look at, like, yesterday my dad died. So it's like my 3 things that I was grateful for were the 3 things he left me with, right? Charm, psyche, because he's a really smart dude. And then the other one was experiences. So it's like there's always another side of the coin, right? Like it's like I always think of like all emotions are they're of the same frequency, but depending on where you read it, right? So it's like if there's a vibration of love and hate, it's where are you looking at that string at that time, right? But I really do believe that they all hold the same effects, or they have the same hormonal releases on the body. And it's really just how your perspective's held on them. Because if you hate somebody truly, is because they're on the other side of it, you can love them truly. Like, anyone you do hate, there is the capacity to love because it's on that same vibration. Yeah, it's on that same line, and that's just it's the same thing with positivity and negativity. Like, it's up and down, right? It's the duality of existence. It's really understanding that anything that is negative, like, well, there is another side to that too. Like, where can we see the positive? What can we learn from it? And I guess that's one thing I want to make sure that everyone understands when it comes to like your partners or your relationships. It's like they have to get it out. Like it's in their brain, first of all, but that doesn't mean that you have to like knock them for it. You just find a way to spin it to the advantage for the whole. And I think that's, I mean, it's difficult in relationships. It's a lot of compromise.
Yeah, that's so true. I'm just trying to imagine. I'm trying to imagine Shelly listening to murder podcasts while she's cooking. There's no way. Turn that shit off. Yesterday, don't put that shit on in my house.
Yeah, again, compromise is the key to relationships. That's what I've learned. And my wife loves murder podcasts. You know what? I even humor her on some car rides. I'll be like, hey, we get, my kind of nonfiction, knowledge-based book. In between, we'll listen to a murder podcast. And she's down. So now our rides are me learning to stay off dark roads in a country, like a countryside area, so you don't get picked up or just blunged over the head. And it's wild. Like yesterday she said a lady sold real estate. Like she was a media mogul. She got chopped up by
Wait,
her.
real estate or media mogul?
So she's a media mogul with
real
like
estate?
this really nice real estate
Okay.
in Southeast Asia. And she got chopped up by her ex-fiance and his dad.
Damn.
Chopped up. Like she even said it was an electric chainsaw.
Okay.
And then they put her head in soup with mushrooms and carrots, so all of her flesh
What
boiled
the
off.
fuck?
And she's telling me this in detail. That's when I sat on her lap and I told her, I was like, you're gonna need to tell me, like, go tell me a really positive story after that one, please.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, for whatever reason, she says she doesn't like violence. She says she doesn't like, any kind of physical nature.
Mm-hmm.
And then she puts these like thought processes in her mind that it's like, bro, like,
That is so.
It's scary.
I would never hurt a fly.
Yeah.
Anyways, play. And so then we ripped the flesh off of his bones. Like what?
There was literally, she's like, there was no flesh on. It was just a skull in a pot. In a pot.
When did you start falling in love with? We'll just categorize it on personal development or self growth. When did you actively decide like this is enhancing my life enough to that this is going to be a daily thing for me? Because for the listeners, one of your goals is to create the largest book club in the world.
In the world, yeah.
So how did we get to that point?
In college, I was dating a girl. Fell in love with her, but Josué still had the ho in his name, so I didn't really break any of my commonalities in dating. I broke her heart, and it was the first time that I actually felt like a deep sense of remorse.
Why her?
She was a sweet, kind-natured, like best way I could say it, just naive. It shouldn't have happened to a girl like that. She was so sweet, so kind-hearted, and when I heard her cry, it really broke me. I was like, damn, I probably made girls cry, but I've never heard it. And this sounded like, again, I never wanted to hear it again. And I felt really bad. Again, I was probably growing into my own. I was a junior in college, coming into, I'm sure, more like mature mentalities and psychologies. But at that moment, I made a decision, like sincerely. I made a decision that I was never going to cheat again, period. I just made a decision and I moved forward. I was reading Buddhism and physics at the time. It's really changed my life. Buddha says you can't change anything in the past. You can learn from it, and then you can move forward on how you see fit. And you have to do your best, and that's all you can do. And you have to accept what ramifications come and move on. Right? They say it is the bravest of those who ask for forgiveness. It is the strongest who can forgive, and it is the wisest who can forget.
Wow, that's powerful.
Very. Like I've been saying that over and over because like as my dad died, I forgave him for a lot of reasons, but I never told him I forgive you. And as soon as I found out he died, that's the first thing I said in my mind. It's like, hey, I forgive you. Like that's it. Like, and I realized like he had asked for forgiveness about a month ago at my niece's birthday. And I told him, like, he said sorry on a few things. And I was like, what do you have to be sorry about? You lived your life. You enjoyed it. We're here. We're breathing. Thank you. But if you want to say sorry to somebody, go talk to my mom, whose life you made a bit more difficult raising kids by herself. So I could tell I had resentment in my voice when I said that. But then as soon as I found out he died, I was like, I forgive you. I wish I would have said that. I wish I could, but in that moment I didn't, because I didn't say it. It's not what crossed my mind. I wanted to be more combative and like I want to respond to him, quick-witted. And then last night, when I did say it, I felt really good. It's like, oh, because I do. I wish I would have said that one more time to him. If I have one regret, I said this to my sister. Like, I would have had another shot of tequila with him and said, I forgive you. That would have been nice. But either way, we'll carry it on. But yeah, like it's.
And if we're being honest, the machismo that is within the Latino male, you'd have been like, I forgive you. Like, forgive me for what? Like it wouldn't have gone the way that you probably imagined. I didn't do nothing. You know what I mean? It's like, and then that combative kind of competition that is underlying every dynamic with Latino males and their fathers.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, very similar, but he's brittle. Yeah, he's if we can say this, and maybe you do cut it or not, he was a narcotraficante.
Oh, okay.
So really early on in his life, he was him. He was him.
He was a big time.
Oh yeah, he was like, if you see pictures, he had like two bracelets, full gold, massive gold. Like, he was wearing like, I don't know, 30, 40K in jewelry.
You know who else just came out and said that? And in the more of culture space? Ralph Barboza, that comedian.
Oh, wow.
His whole family was Mafia.
No, I didn't know.
Or a cartel.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't know, man. I was just observing, and he's like, I tried it. I tried to do it for a couple weeks, and then I made a lot of money, and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. He's like, my grandpa, my father, they both went to prison, came out.
Yeah.
They're good. Like,
Pops
our family's
in the pen. I was born, he was in the pen. Like, my first pictures with him. Yeah, my first pictures with my dad. He's in the jean jumpsuit.
Oh shit.
Yeah, he's in the pen.
Are you able to create a space between? Are you able to create space between you and that?
Oh, 100%.
How do you do that?
I learned from it. Like, I read everything about it.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like though that you have the decision to make space if that's your family member. Does that make sense?
You know what? It's a good point you bring that up. I was 15 years old. I went to his house and he got raided by fake DEA.
Fake DEA.
Fake. It was just another rival gang.
Oh,
they were just stealing from him. So we were held at gunpoint. That was scary. It was very terrifying. So I made that line that day. I just drove a line. I said, hey, as a family, it's dangerous for us to be there. We're not doing that anymore. It's not worth, getting to have that one visit once, twice a year. No. It could have cost our lives. And we were just there. We were just, innocent bystanders. We have nothing to do with this. But just distancing and understanding kind of how it all worked out. I think that's where I got super interested in like how to run business on the back end of what they're actually dealing and what's being said on. They're just negotiations. It's just being super creative in a boardroom. They're just talking about ways in which they can move and circulate economies and goods. It really is, when it comes down to it, just a really high stakes supply chain management.
Yeah, it takes a really open-minded and a really conscious person to make that association, right? Because I think for all of the positives that you're bringing out, we can also bring out a lot of negatives, right? It's like we can extract all the positivity from the cartel, but then we can also extract all of the other shit that comes with it. Yeah. Because I'm all for all lessons. You know what I mean? I'm open to all lessons. One of the things, so we're now let's play over. Let's talk in that arena of positivity, because I don't want to talk about the negativity that obviously the cartel or mafias bring. But in a positive light, the lessons I really like is the skin in the game aspect. That's something that I
read that book because of you, by the way.
Brilliant.
Amazing book.
Dude, that guy is brilliant, isn't he? Mm-hmm. So I started rereading it last night in preparation for this podcast. And one of the things that I want to outline, I think, the story that just the way that he phrased it in this book that I think even our audience can understand is when we talk about economies or businesses or how people deal with each other and they have skin in the game, we don't necessarily mean you have to, put your life on the line. But one of the meanings he's trying to get the readers to understand is, let's say you're contracted to build a house. And let's say the average builder builds a house in a certain way. In one economy, the guy has skin in the game. So he knows that if he doesn't build this house in a certain way, meaning let's say the house falls on top of, let's say the house kills the family that lives there or hurts somebody deeply.
Yeah, he dies.
Right. So, and then you have the other aspect where they don't have those sort of deep roots of responsibility is really ultimately what I hear. Then the people that don't have are disconnected. He says, cut from the earth, cut away from the earth, disconnected from the results of what happens, are more prone to cut corners. And I think that is the ultimate lesson in that book, which is if the people who are creating businesses, who are responsible for culture, who are like, there's just so many different roles that they're playing. If they're leading and they're making rules and making people do certain things, but they're not tied to the results of those things, how would they not cut corners? You know what I mean? It's like you're building in an opportunity for them to cheat. And so in that story, the builder, if his house, his contract, his hands built something that hurt or killed the family, then his life would be on the line.
Yeah.
That's what's really important to understand.
Buy-in. Like that's where I make that association of like you have to build as if you're building a mafia, because you have to take the consideration that you're putting your name behind it. You're putting something that you can lose if something that you did impaired the integrity of the structure of the business, of the relationship, right? There has to be buy-in there. And I love that portion of it. I very much so, I subscribe to that very much.
Oh, 100%.
So, like, if I say I'm going to do something, I write it down and then I sign it. Right. My wife's sister, she was saying, hey, I want to quit this job. They're not paying me. They're not giving me what I want. She's like, I'm gonna quit this job if they don't give me my raise. I'm like, are you serious about that? She's like, yeah. I was like, I actually have it in here. It's in my third page in my notebook. I'm gonna go write it down. She wrote it down and I put signature and I was like, all right, we'll sign it. She's like, what do you mean sign it? I was like, well, you're serious, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna do it, right? If they don't give you the raise, right? And she's like, yeah. I was like, well, sign it then. And when she signed it, she even looked at me. She's like, you looked at me. And then a week later, she's like, hey, I got the raise. I was like, hell yeah. Like, that's what's up. You have that buy-in. And when I tell people that they want goals, they want to say they want to work out or they want to stress less or they want to breathe better, whatever your goal is, you want to do ice baths. It's like, cool. I need 66 days from you because that's the average neurological pathway that it's going to take for you to actually build a habit or something that's going to be long-term. Right? I'm all about sustainability. You need to give it ample amount of time if you're actually serious. I'm going to write it down. We're going to put the dates in there. We're going to put your goals, and then you're going to sign it when you're done. And then you're going to give me $500, right? If you don't accomplish this, what you just signed, it's my $500. You do, get the $500 back. All you're doing is you're putting skin in the game.
100%.
You're just putting skin in the game. It's like, put your money where your mouth is.
100%.
I'm not going to keep it. It ain't for me. But if you do fail, if you don't stick to what you said you were going to do, this is failing yourself. So now that you have something on the line, say you're not feeling it. And you said you were going to work out at 6 p.m. and it's 5:30 and you're like, I just don't want to do it. Well, I think that $500 that you might lose might give you that last bit of motivation you're going to need to actually push forward. So skin in the game is just one of those things where, again, that builder, that was a very powerful story. Like you died if your house
you cut
killed
corners.
other people.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but then you have these cookie cutter homes that have smaller 2x4s and they're probably going to miss a couple rafters because at the end of the day, they're looking to build 100 of these houses in a short time frame because they're looking to maximize their profit instead of maximize the integrity and the longevity. It's really, they don't have skin in the game because they're just going to get bought out if something happens. They have insurance or there's these modes of these methods that we've built inside of this economy that make it so people can cut corners. That we favor the quantity versus the quality.
100%. It's in politics, it's in business, it's in communities, it's in religion, it's in everything. And so that's why that author is so good.
Yeah.
His book, Black Swan, Skin in the Game, Anti-Fragile, all of those books are he's definitely, whatever his title, philosopher, academic, but also rooted in reality. Like his stuff
businessman.
is so good.
And he's a businessman.
He's a business.
You know, like one
Yeah,
dude.
I gotta get this guy on the podcast.
100%.
Yeah.
Like one guy I have a loads of respect for, and he's just everything on the internet right now, is Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
Well, he eats it. He's a capitalist. He's like, I make tons of money off of this. I'm not scared to say that. I'll tell you transparently. Like, I need to make money. It's hard. And
he makes money.
He makes a lot of money. He makes a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Do I agree with everything he does and in the capitalistic world? I don't know. I don't think it's, again, I'm a sustainable human being. I'm looking towards what's going to be here in 200 years. Whereas like if I believe you're a hard time capitalist and you see what it's doing for the economies as well as the sustainability of the environment we live on, like, you study enough biology and you study enough chemistry, you realize that we're one big cell in this globe, and sooner or later there's going to have to be a compromise of working as a unit, as a whole. And I know a lot of people get really scared on that topic. When you go into socialism, you go into communism, you go into this like world order, and it's like, well, I mean, we're already doing that on a micro level, international, and we call it patriotism, and we're behind it. See, we're going to have to get to a point where like we already are in a world economy. We circulate goods from China. Like we circulate goods from everywhere around the world, but we're not calling it a world economy because we have these barriers in between. And again, that's not my it's not my expertise when it comes to like supply chain and world economy. But my wife did study economy, and she does look into the actual like methods and the equations of what's actually going on and what's going to be here in 100 years. And well, right now I think it goes really with the trend of like our short attention spans. Everyone is looking out for that gratification right now. If there's one thing to knock on Jordan, it's like, well, I mean, what's that going to do for your great grandchildren?
If we agree, every action has a reaction, right? Sure. So the moment we choose a side, then there's always that counter side. So our interpretation of good and bad, capitalism bad, sustainability good, or eco-friendliness good. And I think there's some truth in both, but I think where we find that middle ground is we've got to recognize the power of capitalism and how it's created, arguably in the last 200-300 years, the greatest economy of all time, right? In all existence.
But again, are we talking longevity?
Exactly. So then we look at it and we say, is it perfect? Absolutely not. But if we position ourselves against it, then this whole system has to crumble for another one to sprout up. And the people who are more inclined for the system to crumble are also the people I would never want on my team.
I wouldn't endorse it. No way.
I
would not endorse it.
There's no way I would want the people that think creating a community and then not realizing that when there's more than one person, there's politics involved, not having any understanding of what it means to build a community, construction, all of these hard concepts that have been figured out over hundreds or thousands of years. And for them to think that they can just pick up and do it in a space and do it in a way that they're going to even be there long term is pretty silly, And it's like you can't even be successful in a system that it feels like anyone can be successful, and especially here in America. And you're going to go and start over and you're going to build a whole new system from the ground up. Like you still live in your grandparents' basement or your mom and dad's basement. You know what I mean? I think we can come to an agreement because I'm a capitalist, right? Otherwise I wouldn't do what I do. Do we think that it's imperfect? Absolutely. Do we think that we can make it better? Abso-fucking-lutely. Can we shift from an oligarchy or from a predominantly, can we shift that to focusing on our actions have consequence? Sure. Our decisions day to day affect our life. I think we can. Is it going to happen tomorrow? No. But I think also, saying you're in capitalism, right? Like you're literally a business owner. It just doesn't feel right to demonize it, all at the same time participate in it, because the only person that looks silly is you, right? At the end of the day. So making that kind of consensus of capitalism is imperfect. There's a lot that needs to be developed. And that leads perfectly into where, what you're doing, what you want to do.
There's a shift. Mm-hmm. I like to say like it's a big ass yacht or a really big boat, say like a Titanic, right? You can't turn on a dime. That's societies, that's culture. to understand the transition is where entrepreneurs come into play. That's where capitalism does come into play, because then you draw change, right? Because really, at the end of the day, we're biting, or we're fighting for people's attention spans, and we're fighting for their resources. And this type of capitalism, or like I call it, like a conscious capitalism, what's slowly moving towards more of a kind of like a social capitalism, right? Like it is including more, and it's being responsible for the detriments that your product is causing, right? Like, let's just, gas right now, everyone complains about what the gas is like. Well, if you were to take into account truly the full extraction, the carbon offset, like really take into account, like a barrel of oil would be way more expensive, but it's not like that because we subsidize it. So it's like these kinds of things and policies that were made way before our time are just kind of things that have to be revised, or we have to just break it in general, like make something different, like solar. It's like, cool. Well, like now solar has the argument that it's cheaper and it's more sustainably friendly. Okay, I'll do that then. Right? So it's like you don't necessarily have to make all of these changes inside of capitalism. You can just, kind of switch the lanes that you're riding in and start pushing something you're going for. Because I really do hate the people who just want to bitch at people, and they just want to, like, oh, you're doing something wrong and pointing the finger. It's like you're wasting your energy.
Yeah, you have the privilege and luxury to even think that thought.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like most people can't. They're
Yeah.
just in it.
Stop. Don't be the hippie behind like a microphone just screaming at people. Let your actions speak for
Speak louder.
yourself.
Go create that sustainable community.
The one thing my mother taught me my whole life, she's always said it. She's like, I will protect you, to the ends of the earth. She's like, but I can never be accountable for your actions. Like, she said that my whole life. She's like, I can never be accountable for your actions. You have to be responsible for what you do, and I'm just trying to make sure that I do my best, that you're going to act right. And I was like, that's powerful, because there was a point where I was going through this shift, and I was like telling everyone what they were doing wrong, and I was just stressing myself out.
Yeah, dude.
And then I realized, like, there comes so much more gratification, there comes so much more change in being the change you're asking for, right? So I got on roofs, started installing solar. Stopped bitching at people to like be more conscious, and I just started going to do conscious things. And the next thing you know, like what I was preaching 10 years ago, like people telling me you can't sell solar on sustainability, those same people are building their whole marketing funnel on sustainability today. And it's like, okay, cool. That changes. It's 1 decade, right? Like I've seen this happen from people who were stout and they would just knock me all day for even caring about the earth. Like, you can't sell on kindness. Now their whole business model is based on just making it so that they can appeal to the public on that they're trying to do something right. But that's been a fun one to navigate, is all these what I like to call money grabbers in the industry, because solar's hot. Like, solar makes a lot of money. And everyone right now they'll tell you like, oh yeah, we're making a change in the world, it's sustainability. And it's like, you lying sack, bro. Like,
yeah, the greenwashing is what it's called.
Is that
greenwashing?
Yeah, I've been.
Is the term. I think that's a market that would be really interesting to get involved with, which is actually holding the business organizations that are saying they're going to make these changes, and then following up and saying if they had skin in the game, they actually made those changes, and being a consulting firm or a company that actually holds them to the fire. That would be an interesting.
That's interesting. I like that.
Yeah. Because that's what we need. I mean, there's companies in green tech is what it's called. And for our listeners, the only reason I know this stuff is because I created a business in the middle of the pandemic, or the beginning of the pandemic, in in this space, and so I deep dive. And before I do anything, I'll deep dive the topic. So learning about green tech, there's organizations that are creating software to measure people's greenhouse gas, like their green emissions and different things. And I don't know how they calculate it, but that's pretty interesting. So it's like this company is rated by the Green Business Bureau because they have this software and they implement it, and then they source sustainable material, and they source within their country and not from Asia, right? There's a lot of different things, but
people don't really understand the true cost of something. They get it in front of them. They don't realize that, millions of those things had to be made and then sold to then make it makes sense as just from a material aspect, but not from a long-term environmental aspect. And again, that it comes with a lot of complexities. It comes with a lot of studies, a lot of data and research, and it's just coming to light. And there's a lot of debate on what's right and wrong. And I truly believe the people who want to combat the debate are, well, I mean, those who get to benefit from what is current.
Yeah. Yeah, I think coming to that truth of our actions have equal reactions, or every cause has an effect. That came from me studying nutrition and wellness and seeing what you put in your body, what you drink, different things has an actual effect. And that's just the microcosm or the small ecosystem of you. That's just one. But then when you add the ecosystem of humans and animals and plants and everything, it's really easy to see how creating plastics, what the true cost of that product, it might be cheaper now because they're using certain types of cheap labor in China and manufacturing super cheap in China. So you can get it 10 cents on the dollar, but the true cost of those plants, those manufacturing plants, creating that plastic, it creates a hazard within that whole zip code or area code. It damages all the plants, the life forms. And so if you start actually calculating the true cost of what it is to use plastic, how long it takes to break down, hundreds of years, it getting into our water supply, our food stream, into fish, different things, and our body's unable to process it. I think the first fetus was found with microplastics in it, I think 2 years ago.
That's
terrifying. Because our bodies don't know what to do with that synthetic
you can't really break it down. It's really difficult to find that. And I think some really smart kid is going to find some substance that eventually is going to, find a way to break down these plastics, and hopefully, so then we can start to use that, circulate it, recycle it. But again, it comes down for me, like all these conversations revolve down to a sustainability mindset, a resiliency to just make sure that we leave this planet better than we found it, right? Like it's really simple. And I think all of us are going to have ways in which we want to affect or leave a legacy or have family remember us by. And I've gotten really into this one. It's really like easy to just buy into grandkids understanding like, yeah, like we were on the solar revolution, or we were on the change where humanity was on the brink of either figuring it out or blowing ourselves up, right? Like humanity's at this point where the first time ever recorded, we can blow up the planet, right? We have this capability as human beings from physics and from science and putting bombs together and atoms and energy. And it's just at a point where it's uncharted. We don't know where to go right now, right? And that's terrifying. Or it's exciting, because on the other side of fear can be excitement. It really is on the perspective we want to take, on the narrative you want to feed. And that's where it comes down to what you ingest mentally, literally, like visually, energetically. Like it really comes down to what you're putting inside of your body, and then being conscious of it. And is it something that you want to hold on to? Is it something you can build off of? I think there needs to just be more of a conversation of just the awareness. And that's where the book club comes in. I truly believe, like when you said earlier, Jim Rohn says, like, the 5 closest people are the ones who affect your life. It's like, that's the whole show me your friends, I'll show you your future. And like, so like my little spin on that is like, show me your book club, I'll show you your future. Because it's like, let me know the books you're reading so then I can see the narrative you're curating. So then I can see the actions you'll start taking, to then the node in the network, what chain reaction will come off of that, right? That's where like I see the power in knowledge and books. And I'm of that. Like statistically speaking, where I come from and where I grew up, I shouldn't be where I'm at, like statistically, right? Like they say like single household, like parents, like it's like I think 80% of the people in jail right now had a single mother. And so I'm like,
that's a hard conversation to have, yeah.
Single mom, 4 kids. I'm the youngest. We grew up in the hood. Like a lot of my friends in the pen, a lot of my friends have gone in and out. Like you just see what's going on. And to break a statistic, to break a mold takes a lot of discipline, right? I give all of the love, all of the props to my mom. Like she whooped our asses. And that's where, if you want to get in the conversation of like child abuse and like discipline, like I needed it. If I didn't get, I have severe ADHD. Like if I did not get a discipline at home, I would have run amok way more than I already did as a child. Because I was crazy. Like in classes, like teachers loved me because I was a comprehensive child, but they hated me because they couldn't turn me off. And my mom just made it really known that, like, hey, you can do whatever you want, but you're accountable for your actions. And she was the law when I got home. And we talked about that over the weekend. It was just like, if she didn't do that, I would have been running around with the gang. Easy.
Easily.
Easy peasy. No doubt about it. If I wasn't scared of her coming home, then I would have been. I feared her more than anything else in the world. And she said that I had to make sure that when you came home, you knew that I was your worst nightmare, not anything else. And it's crazy because
That's some good parenting advice right there. I have this a lot with my so I co-parent with my first child, and we have this conversation a lot. We're like, do we want her to learn the lesson at home, or do we want somebody else in the world to teach her that lesson? And it's these hard lessons that you got to learn. Every action has a consequence. And if I'm the consequence, then I'll let you know I'm the consequence.
You can also nurture the lesson after.
Yeah.
Right?
For sure. Yeah.
There was never, like, my mother would say, like, she would spank me as a kid, and then she'd come to me crying.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, it hurt her more than it hurt me. And I'm like, man, what you mean? Like, I'm bruised up. What you mean it hurts you more? Like, I'm literally still hurting. And then I got older, and I accidentally hit my nephew one time. Like, I didn't like hit him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just grabbed him too rough. And he starts crying. And bro, my world broke in that moment. I got on my knees. I like checked his arm. I was like, dude, I didn't mean to grab you that hard. I'm so sorry. We were playing. Like, my nephew's a big kid. He's like 109 pounds, big boy. So when he hits you, you're play fighting for real. And I grabbed him hard one time. He started crying. I'd never seen him react like that. And I broke down. And I called my mom not even like 10 minutes later. And I was like, I'm so sorry for ever making you feel some kind of way about trying to do your best to raise us responsibly, because I know you never once wanted to hit us. Well, maybe once or twice, but we won't go there. I have this joke with my mom, but there's one time I'll never forget it. But really, though, it was always in the nature of like, yeah, are you going to let them learn the lesson outside of the home or in the home?
It's an important question, because I know a lot of parents that don't want to discipline their kids. Yeah, they don't want to discipline the kids because they fall under that narrative of, I'll be the bad guy, I'll do this. I was disciplined as a kid, and I don't like my parents. Like, it's just hard for me to realize from my own experience. Like, without that discipline, like you said, we would have been in gangs, locked up, in prison for life. So
we have no idea.
Yeah.
There's so many things that could have happened if we didn't learn in the home versus outside the home. Right?
100%.
I have a lot of like the network that I talk to will then talk about the psychological traumas, and then they'll start talking about like the repetition of them beating wives or beating their children and like having that cause like.
Yeah, they just sound soft to me, bro.
In some nature, you have to consider that is the narrative that's being pushed in the world right now. It's like
read one book, the Coddling of the American Mind, and you'll see what's going on in universities right now with that same mindset of words are violence, and you're like, you ain't seen violence, dog.
You've never gotten beat up, so you didn't get punched in the mouth, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, got it. I posted a picture of my dad yesterday, and me and my brother got into this brawl one night at a bar, and it's just I'm not the biggest fighter. My brother is. I'm not the biggest fighter. I enjoy the physicality. If I need to, I fight, but like I'm not the one that's just going to look for it. And one night I was out with my brother, and we were older, and we never like brawled together, and like everyone knew that you probably don't want to mess with both of us, 'cause we have each other, and there was one night, this one dude just made some vulgar remarks to my brother, and my brother, because he was with me, didn't act on it. And I was like, I noticed it, and for the first time, he showed and practiced patience. And I'm normally the one to do that, so then I felt very inclined to take the other role. So I start spewing off, and it's 5, and we're 2, and they're getting in the car, and I look at him, and he knows the look in my eye. And I just run up to the car, open one door. He opens the door, makes sure that they can't get out this side. It turned into this brawl. It's 2-on-5. We handled ours. The story about it is my dad found out about it. and drove over as fast as he could to like, to have the tea, to talk about like how, man, I had a fat lip, like
Yeah.
he was just so proud that his boys just handled it. And like, it was one of the few like father son moments that I can remember that it was like, he was there to nurture and, just bullshit about the cuts, because he wasn't there. Like I was a crazy kid. I had like 13 visible scars on my head. I was rambunctious everywhere. And, like I thought about that in that picture. I was like, he wasn't there for any of them. But as soon as he heard we got in a fight together and he was able, not far, dude, he's there, lickety split, like just no time. He showed up, wanted to have the conversation. And it was one of those moments where like me, my brother, and him had like got to share that bond of like what you would deem those, family moments.
Yeah, and we don't condone violence on this podcast, but if you're a man, you fight, unfortunately. It's just a part of the nature
Yeah,
of
well,
men.
if someone breaks into the house, is the wife fighting? So I always tell my wife, like, there's equality. I totally agree.
Newsflash.
Yeah, there's always going to be equality in the home. But I ask my wife this all the time, like, who do you expect to get up if there's a noise or someone's breaking in the house? Yeah. I'm like, that is sexist. If you think it's me, if you say me, it's sexist, right? In that terminology. But at the end of the day, I will always instinctually. It's why I sleep by the door. Right?
Protector.
That's essentially, for me, and that goes a little bit further, like evolutionarily, like why do we have more muscle?
Yeah, bigger species, stronger species. It just, you're just talking biology. You're not talking about all of the,
because women,
the politics that come with that.
And this is, maybe I'll get, I'll get canceled on this, but I think women have the harder life. When it comes to like biological sense, they need more energy to actually exist because of the cycles they go through. Right? We don't have aliens that grow inside of our bellies.
I think you're talking about babies.
Oh, babies. Yeah. That's what we call them when they come out. But you have this seed.
Yeah. Women are fucking powerful. Yeah. That's never a discussion. And I'm glad you said that, because it's not even a thought in my mind anymore. Yeah. They definitely have the harder life.
100%. Like I told my mom as a child, like I grew up with two older sisters and mom. So I was introduced to menstruation cycles really early on in my life. And I knew what it was like, like my mom would be different once a month. My sisters would be very, needy. And as a younger brother, I just knew cold water and foot rubs. That helps. Right. But as I got older and I started really realizing what was going on, and I remember going up to my mom and I was like, thank you so much for making me a boy. I don't I don't expel my own blood once a month organically.
Yeah.
Organically, like that's just, you are gonna do that once a month because you are an XX chromosome. Oh, well, thank you for the why.
Yeah, seriously.
I appreciate that, and I will take my workouts and I'll take my licks in life, and I'll do my best to uphold whatever this biology or heaven sent, whatever energy that made it to the point where we work together as a unit for the survival of this family. You have to take on your course, I'll take on mine, but we'll work as one, right?
Yeah, man. And even giving birth is I think there's some tribes, they try to quantify what it would be like to go through birth as a man. And so they spend 48 hours in and out of sweat lodges or sweat teepees. And I don't know if you've ever experienced any of that, for 3 or 4 hours of just drenching yourself in sweat, feeling like you're going to pass out. But you're in that, and then you're dancing for 48 hours straight, no sleep, nothing. And that's their way it's called the sun ceremony. And it's their way to pay respects to the women, because childbirth is probably the hardest thing anyone will ever go through on this planet.
Wow, makes me feel really hypocritical. I've never done anything to really experience other than like just give props.
Yeah.
Like acknowledgement.
Pound it.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. That's a conversation I have a lot in my circle of friends, which is, man, if you have never experienced natural childbirth or been in the presence of your significant other while a human is transitioning earthside, there's nothing more powerful and more empowering and more just like, you can't even, there's not really words to express that, and the respect that comes with that for your significant other. And the most pivotal moment of probably their entire lives, in my entire life, it would change the way that we see a lot of things.
Yeah.
And not even saying, the feminist movement or whatever is right. because I think women are even taking the harder path when it comes to that, being trying to be the breadwinner. Or in a book I'm reading called Pay Up, right behind your head, she's the CEO of a very successful Fortune 500 company, and she's also the caretaker at home. So she has two impossible jobs that she does, and she's like, I'm not sure if this whole thing actually makes sense, this whole movement, or this whole
No, it takes a tribe. Like that. There's, I really do hope if there's a vision towards the future, I do really hope that it gets back more towards a tribal sense. Like people start working together. Because really raising it, like I got lucky. I was raised in a community, although it wasn't the safest, it was a tribe. Like I knew tons of friends, and we were kind of like all of our parents were working, so we had to work together, so we kept each other safe, right? And like you have this networks and whatnot, and like you can trust people. Again, like I just don't think that we're so friendly to neighbors anymore. You know, that's a real big problem because that causes stress. You can't count on people. Like another reason of getting into culture is like I think it's like 75 to 80% of people report that they are not happy working right now. It's a ridiculous number.
high, bro.
Ridiculous number. But it's like if you're not
You
happy
like this
working,
statistic? 75% of college graduates don't have a job in what they went to school for.
I'm one of them.
Okay, keep going
I'm
though,
one of
on
them.
that thought.
Yeah, so being that there's so much discontentment in the workforce, you're going to spend a third of your life working. Like, why wouldn't we focus on one guarantee that you have to have a working living wage to exist right now? Why aren't we focusing on how we're actually getting out of that as far as psychologically? Nobody's talking about that. And that is a huge one for me. And then it's as an entrepreneur and a capitalist, realizing there's an opportunity there, right? It's like, okay, nobody wants to focus on that. Fantastic. Like, I'll do that. 100% would get behind that because at the end of the day, all you're doing is you're just being the hype man for somebody who wants to be happy. We all want to be happy. Like, that's a driving nature biologically. We all want to feel good. And I don't believe that companies are tailoring their profits or their operating expense to making sure that their workforce is. And it's not that expensive. It really isn't, because one way or another, is the way I love to say it, is like you're going to pay either on the front or the back end. No way that you get both, because that's where we get into this lost cycle. That's where you never build loyalty. And you just have to keep worrying about somebody leaving you because you never worried about them being happy where they were. So it's like,
So true,
it's
dude.
just really kind of getting ahead of it one way or another. You're going to spend the money. It's kind of how you build your structure and what you're looking for long term. Again, maybe it's not a long term company. Maybe you're building just to sell. And gosh, those flips they're devastating.
And that's why I'm such a big proponent of personal development as a central mission, because I think when the individual focuses on what they have control over, which is themselves, their development, different things, eventually they're going to get on a path where they figure out their passions and their purpose. And then if we invest and pour into those people with passion and purpose, and they're in a position for a decade plus, and they are self-actualized or get to close to what's, Abraham Maslow says is self-actualization, then you have a bunch of fucking lit on fire with a passion and a vendetta to just bring so much abundance and so much growth into this world, just as the byproduct. Not because they have to, but because they choose to, which is even more powerful.
They've tailored. Like their structure and foundation was built on that. I agree. Yeah.
And that, I don't know how people can't see that individual and be like, that's who I want to employ or who I want to invest in or whatever, like those type of people, versus, no, let's just figure out how to sell the dream to everybody and put them in these shitty jobs that nobody actually likes and enjoys to pay a bill. It's like, come on, bro. Yeah. There's another world.
I got to talk to one of my employees today that she did something essentially to sabotage a relationship. And I let her know that I was very much so in respects of the move she made because it was risky, took courage, and that I just needed her to know that at the end of the day, like I came into this company to make a difference for the better, and that I tell everyone, like, I'm the COO of the company, but my job description is to make sure that everything's working optimally, so that at the end everyone can be happy. That's it. And I told her, I was like, my success is your happiness. If I can make sure that you're happy, I'm successful. And I need you to know that when it comes to business owners, I didn't just get given a job. Like I've worked my ass off for a decade, and I said that. And I was like, I've worked my ass off, and I've built and I've sacrificed and I've tailored myself so that when I got here, I wouldn't be the person you think I am. Because she literally said, I'm just some employee and you're the boss, so you make the decision. And I cut her off and I said, you're a human and I'm a human. And although I have more authority to make the decision, I've also been in this space and I've earned it, like you are right now. And so instead of firing her, I promoted her. And I just told her, I was like, you are not just some human. You are a leader and you are a culture creator and you're somebody that other people count on. And I need you to start changing the narrative. Because if you don't, then you're not the person I want to work with. And I'm not that boss you're thinking about. I am one of your leaders who's standing next to you, not standing in front of you pointing at you. Like I'm somebody that's listening to you because I know at the end we're better together or we should separate now. And it was one of these powerful moments. She starts crying and she just says, thank you for even seeing the potential in me because you're the first leader to ever tell me that. And I was like, that's because I'm not like your typical leader. I came from where you are. Like I've done everything you've done. I know what it feels like to be in your position and try to do something right and fuck up. That's okay. I'm not the leader that's going to tell you mistakes are wrong. If you're not making mistakes, you're not pushing enough. So I'm definitely going to encourage you on that. And I'm going to let you know that this mistake is actually going to end good for you because I like happy endings. I like to make sure that what we do is never in vain, but it's in progression. And she just started crying. She said, thank you. And I was like, thank you. I needed this as much as you did. Like it was powerful for me because like I'm thinking different right now. Well, death just knocked on my door yesterday of the creator who created me, right? Like, so in that sense, I was very much so like, how do I want to live my last day? And it was very much so in the spirit of forgiveness, in second chances, in lessons and progressions. And it was really cool to get that experience today and have that conversation.
So would you say you give them one of those, one strike, and then?
No, dude, we're really kind, man. We have like a 5 or 6 penalty.
Whoa,
it's crazy. We have a couple like 2 warnings.
So I think about this a lot because the word kindness is used so much in entrepreneurship. The candor is kind. The transparency is kind. I'm going to tell you how it is, and then we're going to go from there. I think that's kind. So I think speaking with candor is kind. But I think as adults, after strike 2, after strike 3, it just you start almost training people to make these larger mistakes because there's no consequence. Does that make sense? So where do you draw the line with, this is going to be one of my last questions, but where do you draw the line with kindness and candor? Because I don't think those two are the same, but they can be synonymous if you package it right and sell it right.
Yeah, for sure. There's sweetness that comes in hard candies and soft candies for sure. There's definitely different formalities we can think of it. I have this line that I live by: burn the boats, not the bridges. Right? And so I have bridges. I have lots of relationships. It doesn't mean I'm taking them every day. It doesn't mean I'm using the bridges. But to burn a bridge means you destroy something, right? Have you ever heard the term burn the boats? Yeah. Okay, so Hernan Cortez, Spanish conquistador, he gets to Mexico shores and he's facing this powerful army that outnumbers him 10-1. His men start getting scared and he's like, all right, well, I'm burning the boats because we don't have a choice. If we go home, we're going home on their boats. And so that's what I do when I make decisions. If my decisions are I'm going to burn the boat because I'm not going back anymore. Like this is what's happening. We're going forward. But when it comes to bridges and it comes to like these decisions or say these like opportunities to write the course, because once I make the decision to no longer go on the course, well, it's over and I move on. There's no more. So I guess like I want to be candor in the sense of like, I'm going to tell you that I'm going to be very kind as far as the consideration I give towards second chances to right wrongs. I'm very much so. I want to exhaust every option. But as soon as every option is exhausted, then it's a really hard line of like, well, there's no going back anymore. And I think I learned that in the relationship with my father. You know, like I learned that at a really young age, like if he said he was going to be there and he didn't show up, okay, I have to start learning really quickly that I can't count on you. And then I got to a point where it's like, okay, cool. This is the relationship we have. You tell me you're going to do something, maybe. So I started getting to a point where I would draw the line in the fact that I stayed optimistic, but I would not I wouldn't put my, wouldn't put the house on it. I wouldn't bet on you actually coming through. So it became like this realism, or this realistic perspective to this optimistic perspective, right? Like you have to really take the probability of the chances of something happening. So when it comes to, I guess, the candor and the kindness, right? Like I guess the delineation between the two is radical candor is just being completely upfront, honest, and then kind is, I would say, delivering it in a certain sense. Because I do agree with Gary on a lot of the things he does. He doesn't bullshit you. He's gonna tell you, and I truly, for me, that is the nicest friend I can have. My wife and I married her on this line. She said, "Words of the loyal grate upon one's ears, like a cheese grater. Words of the loyal grate.
Words of the loyal grate
upon one's ears." So like, I'm going to tell you everything regardless of how hard the truth is. And I believe that to be the kindest thing you can do to humans. Because if you lie to them, then you're never giving them the reality of a situation. You're curating for an egotistic perspective. So I'm on Gary's like line where I believe candor is kindness is candor. Because truly, if you can't say something and say vulgarity or just complete rawness, well then are you saving them, or are you saving face? Yeah, like one way or another, you're not willing to have that conversation, and that's where I think I'd say like my most pivotal relationship of candor and kindness is with my wife. Poor woman has to deal with every thought that I have in my brain, because I tell her, if I think a thought that may be in any way negative or in any way detrimental to our relationship, well, I see that as thoughts are seeds, and seeds get watered, and if water gets on them, they grow roots. So I'd much rather just pluck that seed, and the way I do it is I release it into a vibrational frequency. We've talked about it. I said it to you. There's never a point where you're ever going to be worried or anything like that. Like anything in any way is going to get in the way of our frequency as a synchronized unit. I'm just going to go ahead and say it out loud so that at least we can both deal with it together. And she's the most well-spoken individual I know in my life. So she really is really good at like having that conversation and letting us debate about certain things. Yeah. It's a long-winded answer on the candor and kindness.
Oh, you're good, man. That was great. Where can people find you?
Instagram, Sustainable Sway, exactly how it sounds. So sustainable and then SWAY.
Are you on TikTok?
I'm not, no.
You on LinkedIn?
I'm on LinkedIn, Josué. Yeah. Josue. There's a U in between the S and the E. It's not Jose. Everyone calls me Jose. That's why I went to Sway, sincerely.
Sincerely. Nah, not the
Ho. That was just a good intro. Yeah. I left the Ho in college. That's a good one.
I like it. Well, Sway, I appreciate the conversation today. We're going to have to do it again.
Yeah, I definitely hope
there's
it's not
a lot
the
of
last.
stuff that we had to graze over.
We squeezed it in. I appreciate you jumping straight into it.
All right, Wolfpack, as always, we appreciate your attention. Thank you for your awareness. If this brought you any value today, like, subscribe, share this episode. Real quick, what book would you recommend? If you're curating a book club, one book, you got to pick it.
Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl. Read it.
You heard it here first, Wolfpack. Peace.